So, from that point of understanding, we come out with the idea of probability. Probability is very known as the mathematics of uncertainty. Okay, the one that will measure events, because inherently there are many events that are uncertain. Okay, we don't know that it will happen anytime. Here, the concept of probability, the numerical measure of the likelihood that an event will occur. So, a value that you will associate, no, to measure the likelihood, the chance that that event will happen in the future is described by a number, and that is by probability. And that value ranges only from 0 to 1. Okay, when we say the the probability of that particular event is 0, that means that event is impossible to happen. So, imposible gina siya nga mahitabo. But if we assign probability value equal to 1 to that particular event, then it is really certain to happen. That it will really certain to happen. Okay? But of course, if you think that it's almost impossible to happen, then you can assign value that is very close to 0. And it is almost certain to happen, but there might be a very little portion that it could not be happen. Then you can assign probability value very close to 1. Okay? Or if you think that it could be happen one in every two possible attempts, like to sum of the probabilities of all mutually exclusive and collective exhaustive events. So if the events that comprises on a sample space are all mutually exclusive and collective exhaustive events, then the sum of their individual probabilities will sum up to 1 or 100%. Okay, then of course we have the idea of assigning probabilities. First, we have this what they call subjective probability. So, confident student views chances of passing a course to be near 100%. So, this is only on the personal view or intuitive view, no, of a particular individual, that ang chance niya na pumasa on that particular course to be near 100% or less than that. Okay, so subjective yan. Something like there is no any logical basis of claiming that particular case. Then we have here logical, the idea for symmetry or equally likely, like for the case of tossing a coin, rolling dice, playing cards, etc. There is what they call priori assignment. Okay, hello? Can you still hear me? Okay lang?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
This is what we call priori assignment. Priori assignment. I-unmute lang. Kindly unmute lang. If you are not. So, priori assignment, ang ibig sabihin po dito, class, is you can have an assignment of the probability of that particular event even without performing the experiment. Say, for example, you are tossing a coin. So, alam mo na yung chance that head will come out is 1/2 of the time. 50% of the time. Bakit? So, the question is why? Because every time that you toss a coin, there are only two possible outcomes. It could be head or tail. And head could be one out of those two possible outcomes, no? So, 1/2, so 1/2. Same case for rolling dice or rolling a die. So, what's the probability that an upturned face 6 will come out, or having 6 dots on the upturned face? That's 1/6 because there's only one outcome there, no? Na ay 6 dots out of the 6 equally likely outcomes. Playing card, the same case. What's the probability of, say, drawing an ace card? So we know that how many ace card in a deck of cards? There are 4 out of 52. So that's why we have this what we call priori assignment. Logical approach po yan. And mostly that's what we use in the statistics. Then we have also what we call empirical. Chances of rain 75% since it rained 15 out of the past 20 days. So what does it mean? Ang ibig sabihin po dyan is there is already an empirical observations, no? and or shall we say data gathered, and it shows that out of the 20 days, 15 days rain. So 15 divided by 20, that come out to 0.75 or 75%. So of course, if we will use the idea of logical probability, that's simply 50% of the time that it will rain tomorrow, di ba? Kasi alam naman natin sa Pilipinas na dalawa lang yung weather condition natin, either uulan or hindi, no? So yun, unlike in other countries that they have 4 seasons, no? But in our case, we have only 2 weather conditions, either it's a rainy or sunny time. Okay, so that's why we can always come out with 50-50. But for the case that bakit naging 75 o bakit naging 90 or 95, empirical assignment of probability na yan. That's based on the previous days, no? Kino-compute na yan ng mga weather forecaster. That's why if you try to look at any weather news, you may observe that's not really exactly at 50%. Okay? So, mayroon silang mga report na mag-forecast nila for 3-day forecast, mayroon silang 80%, 90%, 95%. So, the more that it will yield to closer to 100%, then that means that that's more likely that it will happen. No? That event is more likely to happen. Okay? Or highly unlikely to happen. The question now is how we compute, no? Probability. So, if all possible outcomes can be listed and are equally likely to occur, so we can compute the probability of an event P. So this is generic, no? When you say event, generic po yan, no? So we will only constitute that by this word event, and that is defined by capital letter E. Okay, so that's how we compute the probability of an event E. That's number of event outcomes over the total outcomes. So what you are trying to find for the probability of event E is you will only get all those number of event outcomes, yung mga number of event outcomes over the total outcomes, no? The total outcomes in the sample space. Say for example, the probability of drawing an ace in a deck of cards, no? So as I mentioned earlier, since there are 4 aces, no, in a deck of 52 cards, that are the ace of diamond, the ace of heart, the ace of spade, and the ace of club. So that's why the probability of drawing an ace card in a deck of cards is 4 over 52. By merely fraction like this one, of course you have to reduce this one in lowest term. That's always basic in mathematics, no? That if possible, we can always reduce that to the lowest terms until that the greatest common factor is only 1. Okay? About joint probability, no? The probability of a joint event, let's say you have 2 events, no, A and B, is simply noted by this symbol, inverted U, no? If you can see the symbol that defines for joint or intersection, that you have to get those elements that are both common, no, to A and B. Okay? For 2 number of course, possible outcomes in samples is say for the probability of doing a red card and ace card. Okay, so ang idea nimo ani pila ka buok sa baraha nga pula nga last take note of it is and card of 52, that is the total number of playing cards, no, or cards. So reduce that, you have 1 over 26, no? 1 over 26. These rules, no, on probability. So first property, the probability of an event E is any number between 0 and positive. So you have already the data that it can 0, yes. It can be 1, yes. Inclusive kasi, no? So it means that if you can compute the value less than 0, that's not the value of probability. And if it is more than 1, then again, that's not the value of probability. So nana mo hint daan when you compute the value of probability, no? So it can be 0 and 1. No siya, ha? Then second property, the sum of the probabilities of mutually exclusive events is 1. Okay? So say for example the event of tossing a coin, or the idea of tossing a coin, so the event of flipping a head and the event of flipping a tail are an examples of mutually exclusive events. So, what's the probability that you can flip head? That is 1/2 of the time. Probability that you can flip tail
fail, that is also 1/2 of the time. When you add their probabilities now, 1/2 plus 1/2, that is equal to 1 or 100%. That is the case when the two events or more than two events are what we call mutually exclusive. And the third property that defines for addition rule, we have also multiplication rule. No? An addition rule will simply state that the probability of A or B is equal, that's their joint probability. Ang idea ni is what is the probability that either A or B will happen. Unlike earlier about the idea of joint probability that those two events will really happen. Okay, but in this case, the idea is most probability lang ang gawas or B will come out. So either, no?
So for example, we have two events that are joined. That means that there is an intersection, no, between the two events. Common elements, may common elements sila. Somewhere at this point, no? Kani siyang region, kani siyang part here. So atong minusa na siya. That's why the third term is very important when the two events are joined. Kasi may redundant information yan. Mayroon palang elements na base na A sa kabilang, and they have to subtract that because there might be a case yung pag join yung probability of A or B could be exceed 1 and that could not be anymore, and that already violates, no, the rule number 1 that the probability must takes values from 0 to 1. But okay, so let us cite an example illustrating the not mutually exclusive events and the mutually exclusive events. Say for example, you are finding the probability of drawing a king or speed, that is equal to simply the probability of drawing a king plus probability of drawing a speed minus their joint probability of drawing a king and speed. So take note that na ay king nga speed sa braha. Okay? King of speed, na ana siya. Okay? So first you have to find the individual probability. There are two events, king and speed. There are two events. So addition rule kay or man. So mutana mo sa pagbalo na ko nga addition rule akong gamiton when the connective is or. Kung an joint probability yun, ha. Okay, so probability of drawing a king, how many kings in the deck of card? There are 4 out of 52. And plus probability of drawing a speed, how many speed in a deck of card? There are 13, no? 13 over 52. May mo na siya sa probability of the joint probability of king and speed tungod kay naay usa ka king of speed. That's 1 over 52. So 4 plus 13, that is 17, minus 1, that is equal to 16 over 52. And reduce that to the lowest form, you have 4 over 13. That, for the case that the two events are mutually exclusive, like this example, the probability of drawing a king or queen is equal to the probability of drawing a king plus the probability of drawing a queen. So you notice here that you don't have the third term anymore. Wala na ning kani siya nga minus part here. Kaya nga naman, kay kaning duha ka events, mutually exclusive man sila, di ba? You cannot get a single card in a playing card that has the king and queen at the same time. So that's why they are mutually exclusive events. So in this case, you only add the individual probabilities. So 4 over 52 plus there are also 4 queens out of 52 cards na in a deck of cards. So you have 8 over 52. Simply sum up the numerator, pareho kasi yung denominator, that is you have 2 over 13. So since ang king and queen are mutually exclusive, so that's why ang third term automatically is set to 0. The probability of drawing a king and queen equal to 0.